first got into witchcraft, the saying was, not all Wiccans are witches, but most witches are usually Wiccan. Hello, sinners, and hail Sappo. It's your hostess with the mostest, Narcissa Deville, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about my experience and my history as a witch, because obviously that is something that you guys want to see more of. And honestly, I've been wanting to talk more about like witchy stuff anyway. So one of the things I realized while I was taking notes for this video is that I have been a witch for the better part of 20 years now. I mean, technically, I guess if you want to say I've been one my whole life, you know, I kind of would say that I came to Wicca in the normal way by way of Catholicism. I come from, I would argue, a very witchy family. Now, a lot of them don't really acknowledge it. I think a lot of my family is very Christian slash Catholic, but there is that sort of underlying just witchy vibe that we all have. I hate this phrase because it comes up a lot in like manifesting, but there are a lot of like synchronicities when it comes to, or I guess serendipities if you want a better word, when it comes to like the family and like things we're thinking about and topics that come up. Like there's just a lot of times where there's a lot of like kind of psychic things. There's a lot of like ghosty things. I think my mother and I are the most in tune because we recognize it for what it is. But I would say it is something that runs throughout my family. You know, we're all kind of witchy whether they recognize it or not. So while I am no longer a Wiccan, I was for a good part of like 15 years. And the thing for me was that at the time in my life that I found Wicca, I have talked about it a little bit before. I was about 15 years, I think I was 14 or 15 years old. It was the summer before my freshman year in high school, not college. I almost said college. It was the summer before my freshman year in high school when I started to sort of look into Wicca. And the reason was I already knew, like, I knew some things about myself as far as like my sexuality went. I knew that I was not, I don't want to use the word normal, but I knew that I was not like what was going to be commonly accepted within Catholic circles. So for me, finding a new religion was about survival. Like, I mean, literally, I know that sounds dramatic, but it was really like I could not go on in the practice that I was being, kind of splitting myself in half, because really prior to that, I had been an altar server. I did mass because I think when you were an altar server, you did like, you basically, I think we were scheduled. It's been a very long time, so I don't exactly remember how it happened. I think we were scheduled like it was a job or something. Like we literally were just put on the schedule and it's like, okay, these are the Sundays that you're serving. I always knew like the particular Sundays that I was serving. So I had been an altar server and I didn't really dislike it per se. There is something to be said about the pageantry of being an altar server. It's so funny to go from being a altar server who very much took the job seriously to then being a full-blown Wiccan who wanted nothing to do with any of it. And I stopped altar serving. I did not go get my confirmation, which a lot of my family was not happy. My family on my dad's side was not happy about it. Oh, I should clarify. It's the family on my mother's side that's witchy. The family on my father's side, I don't think has a witchy bone in their body. I'm sorry to say. And that's not just me not wanting to connect with them. I literally just don't think they have it in them. They are not magical in the least. But I think on my mother's side of the family, there's definitely a lot more like witchy vibes there personally. It was for my own peace of mind, right? I had to find something new. I had to do something different because I was just not in a good headspace. Like I knew that I was like splitting myself in two, trying to be what I thought my family wanted to be, but also trying to be what I thought I should be. And it just wasn't gonna work. It was never gonna work. And so I said, okay. So I found Wicca because I think I was literally just Googling, like, what are religions that are, like, accepting of queer people? And I think that's literally what I Googled. And, here we are. And it's so funny because I very much remember back when I found Wicca, there was no TikTok. I don't even think YouTube was really a thing. Certainly not in the way it is now, right? There was no seeing videos of other people. There was no learning about any of this from, you really only had blogs and I think forums. I never really got into forums for anything in my life. I'm not a forum girly, but I definitely got into blogs and websites. There were like websites with spells. I still remember my very first Book of Shadows was, I think I still have it somewhere, but my very first Book of Shadows was actually a composition notebook that for some reason I like ripped part of the cover off of and then, wrote Book of Shadows and put a pentagram and, all that stuff on it. And, it was very DIY. I love a DIY Book of Shadows. I really do. I think that's very much my vibe. I mean, I found little spells that were on this website that was like a witchy website because, again, there were no there was no TikTok. There wasn't even Vine at that point in time. I think that would have been 2006, 2007. It would have been the summer of 2006 going into 2007. So like ancient history, really, truly. I really don't even know if I don't know when the first YouTube video went up, but like I was not using YouTube for that back at that time. So like I really had to find my own way when it came to like spells and magic. Blogger was very much in vogue. That should tell you how old all of this is, or like Blogspot, I think is what it was. And that's where you found community. That's where you found like spells and stuff like that. And I really, really, it's so funny thinking about all of that. And I guess there's always a question of like how legit is this thing that somebody's posting, because it's just a stranger. And that's kind of the risk, I think, of things you can find now on like TikTok and YouTube, is like how legit is this thing that someone is saying or offering. When you see those things where it's like, I can cast this spell for you and it's on Etsy, it's like, well, how do I know that you're legitimate? When I was in high school, I was very open about my being a witch, which got me into some trouble in my Catholic high school. But I think there were people both in the Catholic high school that I was in, but also when I transferred to a public school later the next year, there was people who very much was like, there were the people who were like, okay, prove it. And then there were the other people who were like, can you do a spell for me or something like that, do like a love spell or whatever. And I was just like, no. I mean, I'm so much that girl, and I don't know, maybe this is something weird about me, but like I'm so much that girl who's like, look, if you want something done, you got to do it yourself. I'm not doing it for you. And it's so funny to think about the fact that I could have really been like starting the cottage industry of doing spells for people for money. I could have been making, if I had had that like side hustle mindset as a teenager, I could have been making money off of this, but I didn't think about it. But there was always going to be people who were like, I don't believe you, because their view of what witchcraft is just films. I mean, there's still people to this day who view like, oh, well, if it doesn't look like it does in like a movie, then it's not real. And it's like, well, nothing looks like that. That's not how this works. I mean, this is mostly, a religion. It's a spiritual practice. There's so many different ways you can look at it. At the time, I was very much witch by way of Wicca, but that's still, it's a spiritual practice. It's a nature religion. It's all these things. So it's like, why would you assume that it's going to look like it does in a film? So that was always kind of difficult, because I think people had all these expectations when you say, oh, I'm a witch, and clearly not something I should have advertised, but I was young and I really thought I knew everything. And it's funny because like people in my Catholic school really, really were like, it was such a mix, right? There were the people who didn't believe me at all. And then there were the people who were like kind of scared of me, to be honest, which I found kind of funny and empowering, because I had never had that effect on people. I was never someone that was like, ooh, scary, terrifying. But when you say you're a witch, apparently that's all it takes to really scare some people and make them wonder, what are you going to do? And two very separate ends of the spectrum, right? You're the people who absolutely refuse to believe. And then there was the people who were like terrified and like, causing a scene in class and like wanting to string me up and have me crucified or burnt to the stake, like literally things that were suggested. And like, I think if my mother had been maybe, I don't know if I ever told her actually until much later, but I think if she had known or she had been a little more paranoid, she probably would have been like, um, that's a pretty serious, like, you're gonna crucify someone over this? That's really serious. And it was funny because my religion teacher at the time was just so unbothered by it all. All of the students in my religion class were like, "Oh my gosh, this is so awful. She's this and this." My religion teacher was just like, "It's a nature religion. You need to calm down. Like it's not that deep." And I very much appreciated that. I very much appreciated that at the very least, my religion teacher did understand, and she was very cool about it and was very understanding and like didn't make anything of it. She's like, it's a nature religion. You guys are being way too dramatic. You're causing a scene and you need to stop. Which, when you are the type of child that I was, I think you kind of need all of the allies you can get. And usually, I think I was usually the one who was friends with teachers because I don't know, there's something about the like weird outcast kid that we're just often friends with our teachers. You know what I mean? Because we don't fit in with people our age. And so ultimately, I think we end up kind of accidentally, like almost becoming like the teacher's pet. And I remember like being in science camp. This was like sixth grade. And, when we were going on like night hikes, I got to kind of hang back with the teachers because I was a slow walker, but also like, I got to hear them talk and gossip and all this shit because they were like, she's cool. Like, she's not going to do anything. But it was just also like, I don't know. I didn't, I had friends. Like, let me not pretend like I didn't have friends. But it was just like, I knew I wanted to be a writer since I was 12 years old. I was always very obviously queer even before I knew it. In a way, I think finding Wicca was a great thing that happened to me because in both schools, I kind of became, famous for it. Everyone knew me as like, oh, that's the witch kid. Even people I did not know knew who I was either by my description or by the pentagram necklace. I really don't know, but like people knew who I was. When you are openly, especially in high school, I will say that when you're openly a witch in high school, people really will project all kinds of shit onto you. And just all of their like fears and frustration, whether or not they believe in witchcraft, they will just project all of this shit on you. And so you're just sitting there like, okay, I don't know what you want me to do with this information. Like, and like I said, this was before the era of YouTube. This was before the era of witch talk. This was really before people could really learn about these things. I feel like now, and I could be totally wrong. I don't know anyone who's like high school aged, but I feel like now it would probably be not a big deal to say, oh, I'm a Wiccan in school or something like that. But at the time, it was so very like, ended up being such a bigger deal than I expected it to be. And I mean, hindsight, it's hilarious. But at the time, I think it was kind of like a little bit stressful. For a long time after high school, I kept up with Wicca. But as I mentioned, I never really had like an altar space. I never really had like a specific deity that I worshipped. I was always kind of just like the general term of goddess that I worshipped. I was very like, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to keep my options open. That sounds weird, but like, I really just never had a specific deity at that time that I was working with. There was never, like, I just didn't, I don't know. I just never took the time, I guess. I just kind of like vaguely said, oh, okay, the goddess, divine feminine, whatever. And I will say, and I think I kind of admitted to this in another video, that I don't think I really ever did the work mentally and spiritually to sort of unpack my Catholic upbringing. I think I kind of just went straight into Wicca with some of the same kind of core beliefs and just was like, yeah, I'm just going to slap a witchy coat of paint on kind of what I was already primed to believe. And I think I really didn't do the work to unpack all of that. And so when I did have to eventually unpack it much later, I kind of felt like confused because I was like, I thought I already, like in my head, I was like, I thought I already did this, but I never took the time. You know, I convinced myself that I took the time and did it, but I never did. And that's the problem is like, you know, if you come to a pagan religion from a Christian religion, you really have to unpack the things that you were taught you know, for much of your life. You really have to unpack the things you were led to believe for so much of your life. And I think that can be really difficult to do. It can be really mentally and emotionally intensive to do because you have to kind of look at yourself and say, okay, this is what I was taught, this is what I believed for a very long time, and now where do I stand? Where do I believe, what do I believe now, I guess, is kind of the question you have to ask yourself. And still to this day it can be a struggle at times, where I find myself falling into these patterns of Catholic guilt. And nobody ever tells you about that. It kind of fascinates me that thanks to TikTok, Catholicism has become very cool now. And it's become very like a fashion aesthetic, but also just like a thing that people are like, oh, this is so, you know, cool. It's like the cool religion and the easy religion. And, you know, you're forgiven if you go to confession and all this shit. And it's like, yeah, tell that to someone who actually grew up in the church, who has so much guilt and trauma from just existing. Tell them how it's the cool religion and you can just be forgiven as long as you go to confession. It's like, you know, and look, I can't blame anyone who discovers something on TikTok and thinks that because a few people on TikTok or YouTube or wherever are telling them that this thing is like cool and fun and whatever that it is. I can't really blame someone who's not, you know, doing their research, or maybe they're super young so they're just gonna take it at face value what this person is saying to them. But I do kind of, I don't know, I encourage people to just really do your research when it comes to what you want to believe, because it's so easy to just like, oh, this influencer who seems really cool believes this, so maybe I should believe it. You know, it's so easy to get pulled into that because of the nature of influencer culture and the nature of YouTube and TikTok and all of that. I think it's very, very easy for people to get sucked into, oh, this person that I really like and respect thinks this way and believes this way. And I think it's really easy to kind of trust them, and you want to there it's sort of a requirement, I think, of doing YouTube and doing TikTok and all of these things, that you build up this trust with people. People have to trust that that what you're telling them is correct. And hence why it's a big deal when there's a situation where, hey, a YouTuber is promoting something and it turns out to be a scam. It's like, why that's a big deal is because people trust YouTubers. They trust what they're being told and what they're being led to believe by this person. And, you know, you can say, oh, you should take this with a grain of salt. You should take every YouTuber, including me, with a grain of salt. I can say that, but like, of course, people who like you are going to be more inclined to believe you. And when you say something like that, I think that even more makes them want to trust you, because, okay, you're saying you should be skeptical. You're telling someone that you should be willing to take things with a grain of salt and not just assume that because someone says something on YouTube that they're the expert, that they know everything. Like, I think people are almost more inclined to trust you. People can kind of just say whatever they want and people are going to trust them because they're a YouTuber and they have this or TikToker or whatever, and they have this personality, and, you know, you're more inclined to trust them. Whether or not you should be is a different story. So that was a long tangent to say that I think I'm very much of the belief that we should all, and look, I'm guilty of it myself. I am certainly guilty of being the sort of person who, if someone I watch online says something, I am more inclined to trust that. I'm more inclined to believe that. I'm more inclined to listen to what they have to say. Even though I know as a YouTuber the dangers of that, and I know like that you shouldn't do that, it's that parasocial relationship that I think is part of what being a YouTuber is, but also kind of the danger. It's like, it's such a whole big thing. Anyway, I'm totally getting off topic. It's not any dramatic thing. There was no falling out. I never really had, a coven, never really had a real coven like that. So there was no dramatic falling out. It was just kind of, I stopped feeling connected that way. I stopped for a very long time. I sort of just didn't feel super connected to my spirituality. And I just kind of was going through the motions for a very long time. And eventually, a friend of mine was researching a different spiritual practice, and they told me about it. That was still in, witchy world. And so I decided to look it up myself, and I found that I really resonated with it. And so, that's where I'm at. So I do still call myself a witch. I am still witchy, but I would say that I don't consider myself a Wiccan. I guess I'm still pagan. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the long and short of it. That's kind of my history as a Wiccan. I do have some like questions I think I'm going to answer for a different video. I think next week I'm going to talk about some like other parts of it that I think are a little more specific and kind of just questions that I've been asked over the years. But if you do have any questions based on this video or anything you want me to answer further about like my witchy experiences, I would love to hear it in the comments down below. Anyway, yeah, I think that's really everything that I have to say. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to this channel. You can also become a member of this channel. We have 2 tiers, and you can also become a patron at patreon.com/NarcissaDeville. That is my members only behind the scenes channel. There's also my second channel, which is Deville Worship Lit, and that is going to be where I talk about things like writing and books, reading. I've been doing a ton of reading. I actually finished 4 books so far this year, which for me is kind of a record. I know that doesn't seem like a lot, and a lot of them have been really disappointing. So, like, tune into that because I have a review coming for a book that I read recently that I just did not like, and that's going to be fun to do a review for, so stick around for that. But yeah, until next time, stay devilish and see you next Thursday.